Hey, and welcome to Friends and Foes. It's a football show. My name is John Dammit. I'm joined with my friends Chris Cortez and Michael Foose. We've got a pre-draft day spectacular going on. This is our final impressions, our final predictions before the 2021 NFL draft starting tomorrow. Going to be April 29th, starting up tomorrow. So anything we talk about today, it's probably going to be all thrown against the wall. Tomorrow it's all going to be thrown up. So we are going to be recording this at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we're going to bring the guys in and talk about some things today. We have a show rundown. If you're watching the screen on YouTube, you can see we're going to talk about news and rumors, do's and don'ts of the draft from our perspective, steals, sleepers, and busts, and of course, our final first round mock draft. But let's check in with the guys, Chris Cortez, Michael Foose. Chris, how you feeling today?
I feel good. You know, it's kind of like Christmas Eve that we're getting a taste of football tomorrow. I'm very excited. And yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Well, that's Chris. What about you, Foose? How you feeling? Did you wake up feeling dangerous?
Not today. I don't know. Doesn't even feel like the draft is tomorrow. It just almost feels like it's one of those never-ending seasons of just constant draft rumors and what you want. You hear about a trade coming and all this stuff. Feels like the eve before March Madness, where you're like all ready and you think you know what's going to happen, and then all of a sudden, a few games in, your bracket's busted.
Yeah.
Except it doesn't just impact the rest of the month, but it impacts your team for the foreseeable future. So I'm excited to see what happens. As an Eagles fan, I have to temper my expectations, but we might need to talk about that later.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we had already gotten some mock drafts set yesterday. And then let's start right off with the news as of today. The Broncos and Carolina Panthers make a trade, sending Teddy Bridgewater to Denver for a 6th round pick. Gentlemen, your thoughts on the news today?
I'm not that surprised. I mean, Teddy Bridgewater is a guy who it seemed like they overpaid to start with in Carolina, that they were just kind of looking for a guy to plug in, and Teddy Bridgewater, he had a decent start to his career before his injuries. I mean, Denver grabbing him 6th round pick sounds like a good deal to me. That's one more guy to have in your QB room, even if you believe that Drew Lock is the future. And for a 6th round pick, even if you cut him before training camp and you end up drafting a guy or trading for another guy, I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Chris, what about you? Do you think this changes Denver's plans at all?
You know, I do. I can't see them taking a quarterback in the first round at this point, now that you have Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater and have already kind of have a quarterback competition probably going into training camp. So I can't see them taking a chance on a guy in the first round. Maybe later in the draft, maybe they decide to do something. But I think they probably go for another position. I feel bad for Teddy Bridgewater. I just do. Just thinking about the injury in Minnesota, trying to work himself back. And now, you know, he gets traded for a 6th round pick. Not a bad deal for Denver. Carolina's paying for some of his contract. So it makes it easier to swallow. And yeah, you know, it's a competition. I'm interested to see who kind of wins that job coming out of training camp.
But I just kept thinking, who has a more of a raw deal? Ryan Fitzpatrick, Teddy Bridgewater, or Josh Rosen? Like the kings of the hat trick of quarterback carousel. Ryan Fitzpatrick been doing it for a while, of going to hold people over, or Teddy's going to go and be the bridge, pun intended, quarterback for whatever they happen. Here's what threw off for me. I had Denver trading up a couple of spots to be New England to get Justin Fields. So that news broke today. All right, we're going again. And then, of course, you're going to have this draft where, depending on the first couple of picks, you're going to have these different dominoes that completely go off different paths. So we also had a little bit of division trade. The Washington football team traded for the tackle that they traded away or didn't want to sign before. Thoughts on that?
I'll let you go on first on this one, Chris.
I think I'm still processing it, to be completely honest. I'm not really sure what Washington is doing. Just to be completely honest, So Foose, I'm happy to hear. Maybe you have more on this than I do.
So much insight, yeah.
But yeah, I'm not really
No.
sure what they were thinking.
To me, it just seems like Washington um, thinks that they have an opportunity to compete this year. Um, and getting a guy like Eric Flowers, I mean, he's not going to be a guy that's there long term, I think. Um, it's more of let's get some depth right now because we can win now. They won the division last year. They have a better quarterback, in my opinion, with Ryan Fitzpatrick. They have Heineke, and they could easily draft a guy this year, whether it's first round
Yep.
or whether it's later on in the draft. So to me, it shows that they think that they can win now, and they're trying to add depth to a position in need.
Which is a good point, because you don't always have to get your first-round quarterback. I mean, they had RG3 and Kirk Cousins in the same draft, and Kirk was the one who actually ended up lasting out in the later rounds. So especially if you have a solid defense like they have, just shore up, get extra offensive line protection for whoever you do bring in. Of course, we see Kansas City making another win-now move. Basically, this trade to me with Baltimore was just like, never again. Never again are we going to get to the Super Bowl and have our $250 million quarterback be running for his life. We're not doing that again. So instead of just taking a tackle, which it's a pretty good offensive line draft in the first round, we want a ready-made player right now. And Baltimore's like, okay, just give us more draft picks. We're cool.
Yeah, as an Eagles fan, I can kind of sympathize watching Patrick Mahomes run around and get killed. I mean, Carson Wentz brought a lot of that on himself, but there was a lot of injury issues with the Eagles the last few years on the offensive line. And I mean, the Chiefs are a team that can win now. They went to the Super Bowl, and with a capable offensive line, it would have been a much better game. Anybody can see that, and so I think it makes sense for both teams. Orlando Brown wanted to be a left tackle. You got Ronnie Stanley there, who's one of the best left tackles in the NFL in Baltimore, and so there's obviously friction. And I think both teams got out with a great deal. One of those win-win deals, in my opinion. I guess it more depends on how Brown plays out, how the picks play out, but on paper right now, I think it's a win-win.
I was interested to see this from Baltimore's perspective because I thought two things. If they keep both picks where they are, I would assume that one guy is probably going to be a tackle to replace Brown, and then you can maybe add a weapon with the other pick. I also wonder, with those two picks close together, are they thinking of maybe packaging and trying to move up? Maybe a little bit, kind of to the early 20s, maybe late teens, something like that. I don't know that they are, and I don't know who they would be trying to acquire. But to me, yeah, you could probably replace the tackle you lost, and you can add a weapon. So I think it's a great move for them.
Yeah, and to your point, you never know if they might on the back end of the first round. You might have some teams trying to trade up and get that fifth-year pick, fifth-year option on some of those players. So you might be able to get a couple more picks in the second round because there's so much depth in that second round.
There's also a few guys that I think will fall in the draft.
Yeah.
And so if the fall ends up being a little bit more substantial, they might say, okay, now we have more picks to package to go and get the guy who's, maybe high on our board, but who's falling down in the draft.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, I gave us a plenty of space here for the endless, copious, never ceasing amount of draft rumors that will roll all the way until the draft starts and throughout the draft event. So, Chris, you had something you wanted to touch base on with San Francisco, right?
Yeah, so, according to Kyle Shanahan, Jimmy Garoppolo may be on the roster by the end of the weekend, or he might die. He said we all might be dead. So who among us can know who will be on the San Francisco's roster by the end of the weekend? Kind of an ominous way to say, hey, we're probably getting rid of him. A really ominous way to say it.
Rid of him.
But it was a fantastic press conference. That's what I can say.
This tracks, though. That nihilistic type of philosophy makes sense for what they gave up if they do go Mac Jones at third overall.
Yeah.
So they just don't care about anything because nothing matters. So, and Foos, let's check in with your team in Philly. You read off about like 3 or 4 different rumors for what people are talking about for you guys today.
Yeah. I mean, Howie's apparently calling everyone that has a phone. I got a call from him today asking how much it would cost to move up. But it's just something he does. I love it about Howie. I mean, I'm probably one of the minority of Eagles fans that actually likes what Howie Roseman does. The problem is whether or not some of those guys work out. But he's the guy that can get that deal done and get the guys in the building. And so I like that about him. But you had rumors like the Eagles love Kwity Paye. You have rumors that I just read of trying to trade up to get Jalen Waddle, or even trying to trade up to get Patrick Surtain. So to me, it's just all smoke and mirrors at this point. I mean, it's going to come down to obviously Thursday night, and who knows what's going to happen. I mean, I have no clue. Yeah. So
one thing I've always appreciated that how he does from a distance, even as a rival fan, is he doesn't overvalue his late round picks. So the ability to for example, Dallas finally did this. We flipped a 6th round pick for Robert Quinn. He came in, had a great season, left. We got a great comp pick for it. So there's no reason for. I think that was the key in you guys' Super Bowl run. He was like flipping late round picks. We'll bring in J.H.I.E. Let's not spend too much. All of a sudden, you guys got a full team. So there's definitely something to be.
He's a wheeler dealer for better or for worse. For better, you win a Super Bowl. For worse, you go 4-11-1 and you lose your starting quarterback and head coach. So, you got 2 sides of the coin there.
But you got the ring, and really that's all that matters.
We got a Lombardi trophy.
Yeah,
I'm fine.
All right, that's perfect time. We'll move right along our next segment of the show, do's and don'ts. This is where we're going to talk about our personal philosophies on the draft. What we want our teams to do, what we think smart for our teams to do in the draft. We're going to start it off. Common questions with best player available versus need. Chris, why don't you start off us this time? What are you thinking for your thoughts for just your team in general, but also good strategies in the draft?
Yeah, for my team in general, just thinking about Dallas and really how atrocious the defense was last year. I feel like even if there were a better offensive player on the board, you got to draft defense. You just have to. You got to take the best defensive player available. So you go need there. It is interesting. I was listening to something earlier this week that Pittsburgh and Buffalo may take a running back at the end of the first round, which I don't love, but in their mind, it's like, man, there's a missing piece here, and maybe this is the missing piece. I think generally best player available, but it really depends where your team is at. Are you one player away? Are you a rebuilding project? Are you somewhere kind of in the middle? But I would say generally I go best player available, but it's kind of a case-by-case situation. And for Dallas in particular, let's say Jalen Waddle or Devontae Smith is the best player on the board. My thought is we've got 3 great receivers. We need defense. So even if there's a higher grade on that guy, give me Patrick Surtain instead.
Yeah, when you get into best player available versus need, I generally tend towards best player available. But, you get a situation like last year where the Eagles drafted Jalen Hurts 2nd round. When you have Carson Wentz, you get some of those situations like you talked about. Maybe Waddle and Smith are there for Dallas, and then you just now add a 4th receiver. It's like, is this necessary? So yeah, you don't want to draft for needs just alone. The biggest thing that comes to mind when I think of best player available is Aaron Rodgers 2005. I mean, it was going into the draft. I remember it was Smith versus Rodgers. Who's going to go number 1? Who's going to go shortly thereafter? And Smith obviously went number 1, and then Rodgers fell the whole way down. And you look at the draft, and it's like there are so many teams that passed on Rodgers that could have used a really good like a Hall of Fame quarterback. I mean, what team doesn't need a Hall of Fame quarterback? But it seems like they draft for needs that they had that year rather than looking at the big picture. If you're a team like the Buccaneers, draft for need right now because you have Tom Brady.
Yeah.
You just signed Antonio Brown. Like, just get the best player in the building. For the Eagles this year, you draft best player available without a doubt because there are so many needs and you're not looking to win a Super Bowl this year. You want to, but let's be realistic. It's not going to happen.
I would even say look at Atlanta at 4. So Atlanta, who had a bad year this past year, has a coaching change and all of that. Kyle Pitts is probably going to be the best player available at that point, and I think they should absolutely take him. Do they need an offensive weapon? Could they probably draft defense? Sure. But we're talking about a guy who could potentially be a generational tight end, and you also don't know what's happening with Julio Jones over the next couple months or year or so. And so, they're in a position where I would say, if I'm Atlanta at 4, take Kyle Pitts, hope you score like 40 points a game this coming season, and just try to outscore everybody who cares about defense. You'll figure that out later, right? But it's, again, every situation's different. But in their situation, I would say take Pitts no matter what, figure everything else out later.
Yeah. Yeah, in Atlanta, real quick, they're also with number 4. They could take a quarterback,
Yeah.
And so that's a best player available versus need thing right there. The number 4 pick, we can talk about this later with the mock, but it seems like that for what Atlanta does is so pivotal for the rest of the draft.
Yeah, I agree.
And I also think it depends on where are you in the round. Yeah. So there's certain categories. If you're a top 10, top 15 pick in the first round, well, then there's certain expectations you want from that player. So it's sort of best player available for me within reason of need. So Dallas, for example, I'll use that as an idea. Or Kansas City should probably not take a quarterback, even though they might be the best player on the board in the first round. Dallas should probably not take a running back in the first round. Insert a position where you probably don't need that much depth. Now, I'll even take that back because I think even within reason, quarterbacks only increase in value. They're always maintain their value. So one of these days, a team's going to start drafting quarterbacks early on when they already have their franchise.
Chris Sims could have been right, and Justin Fields goes to the Buccaneers at 32.
Now, he usually has a good idea on how QBs will play out in the NFL. He has a good hit with that, but the draft order, no, somebody's going to pull the trigger that way before. And that comes into the trade up, trade down scenarios. Because usually in a round, there aren't 32 first-round talents in a draft. You might have in that 15 to 18 range, sometimes even less, depending on the year. So, is it worth getting up to get a certain talent? My general rule that I like for my teams is history shows if you trade up, you typically lose. Trading back, you get more assets, you get more darts to throw at the board. Quarterback is the exception. If it's your guy, which is why we'll give San Francisco a little bit of slack. If it's your guy who you think is your franchise QB, doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. If you think it's the guy, pick your QB. Don't worry about it. Don't play games, because quarterback purgatory is an awful place to be for a team.
Yeah. I think trading up and trading down, it's all about value. It's knowing other teams to a general extent, but realizing, okay, I can get this player, like this player or this group of players, this tier of players that I'm targeting here at this pick will be available later on back, and maybe I can add some more value and build up an arsenal, if you will. Because I think so much of the NFL nowadays is built on rookie contracts because you can only pay out veterans so much. And trading up, it's so hard for me to say that a trade up's a good idea unless there's a guy that you love and okay, we have a fit for him. And especially in the first round, if you trade up for a guy, he has to be starting, like without a doubt. This isn't a guy who's a backup or only if he's a quarterback can he be developmental, and even that to an extent. But I think trading down is typically the wiser thing to do. You don't hear a lot of people that trade down and regret it.
Yeah, I agree with that, Foose. I think you trade up for guys who can potentially be generational talents. this is not going to happen, but if Jacksonville said today, we're trading the number one pick, I could see, a bunch of teams saying, okay, we don't care what the price is, we'll pay it because we have a shot at Trevor Lawrence. I think with that number 4 pick that you mentioned, if Kyle Pitts can end up being a generational tight end, I could see teams, but there's really only a handful of guys that I think you could say that about. Very often, and I think, John, you alluded to this a minute ago, trades where it's like, okay, we're giving up 5 or 6 picks to get this one guy have very rarely, if ever, worked out. In fact, it works out for the team trading down. I think for the NFL, what's so interesting, things change really quickly. And so if you're able to acquire a bunch of picks over a couple of years, and a lot of those guys end up starting, you can rebuild fairly quickly and have these guys on rookie deals and keep your team together for a while. And so I almost think teams like Detroit, teams like the Broncos that are not in that top 5 in this draft and probably can't get that generational. I think it's almost wiser for them to move back and say, okay, let's see how many more picks we can acquire. And in a few years, we might be in pretty good shape. I feel like it's a lot easier to rebuild that way than just saying, okay, we're going all in on one guy. We may not be able to surround him with something, but at least we got our one guy.
And one last thing I want to say about this too is it's interesting. Sometimes when you trade back, it makes a lot of sense. But other times, if you whiff on those guys, you look like so foolish.
Yeah.
Like, when Dallas and Jimmy Johnson made the Herschel Walker trade, like, obviously it paid off for you guys. Like, you guys hit pay dirt. But then you also look at the Ricky Williams trade. And Mike Ditka famously trading away his whole draft to get one player, Ricky Williams. But who did he trade with? I mean, do you guys even know? It was Washington. And so what did they do with those picks? Where was the dynasty of Washington in the early 2000s? It was nowhere to be found because they couldn't get good value with those picks.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that goes to kind of one of the things I was thinking about when you're trading. Have a plan of attack that you're going through, because even with those Dallas picks, if you go through, that's how they built their offensive line. We also threw money, no salary cap at that time, but typically one player is not enough. So even as much as Kyle Pitts is amazing, for example, I don't know if I want to trade up for him to grant capital. Now, depending on your team, right?
Yeah.
Because how many Hall of Fame pass catchers have we seen go through the league and didn't equate to winning? So there's this balance that it goes through. So with anything, there's always exceptions, because then you look at, okay, is it worthwhile for me to give up a 4th or 5th round pick for somebody who may or may not make my team, to go up and make sure I get this player since they drop further down the draft. So I think also fans and teams, temper your expectations. These are rookies coming into the league. Now, what my expectations are usually, if you're a top 100 pick, if you're in the first 3 rounds, I expect you to be starting for the most part. Yeah. So now, depending on the position, because sometimes you'll be a rotation player, like defensive line, linebackers, cornerbacks. Mm-hmm. You're probably running in a rotation. But for the most part, if you're a top 100 pick, I expect you to start. I think for my own team, we have this thing where it's if a 5th, 6th, 7th, 4th, 5th, 6th round pick, we get excited like, oh, we got this guy late, and then we're upset when they don't play at all their first year. I'm like, yeah, I probably don't expect them to have that big of an impact. If they make the team, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, even for my, just thinking expectations when it comes to the Eagles, we haven't had that many great drafts lately. I'm just hoping for some competent starters from this at the end of the day. It'd be nice to, like you said, to have your first 3 rounds be guys that end up starting. But ultimately, that rarely works out, at least from what I've seen. It's so hard to hit on guys that, I mean, the draft is just, you're just throwing darts at a wall and hoping that something sticks, so to speak. And so, first round, I mean, definitely should be starter, especially on a team like the Eagles. But last year, I mean, third round, I think we got a linebacker, Davion Taylor, and he like saw a few snaps at linebacker, and most of his time was on special teams. So you hope a guy like that turns developmental, but you know, it's so tough to be able to look, especially nowadays with COVID, to look at the college and say how's that going to translate to the NFL. I think expectations for this year almost need to be a little bit lowered because of COVID and just how everything kind of played out. Because some guys we just don't know about, and some guys they might have looked great once upon a time and aren't great now.
But they've had a year off of football.
Yeah,
some.
So
Trey Lance.
No, I'm gonna help us move it along just a little bit. I think we all agree we really don't like trading within our rival division.
Oh,
Especially,
absolutely.
We're not going to try to help anybody get a QB in our division. Now, if it's going to benefit us, cool. But like I think Fusi mentioned in a previous episode, Philly and Dallas swapped like 5th-round picks last year. It might have been the first time
Something.
in nearly like 2 decades. Okay.
Yeah, and you guys took a center, and we were just like, what in the world?
Who ended up who's now our starting center?
Exactly. Why even do this? Why even trade? What's the point? What are you going to get out of it? Nothing. It's a lose situation.
I mean, maybe if you're a good businessman, you just think in a blind thing, okay, you're giving me ammo, I'm going to worry about my team, I don't care about the other team. But it's even one of those things to me as a Cowboys fan of like, if we get wiped down, it's just pass catchers. If the cornerbacks are gone, if the tackles are gone, I'm just like, I'm just going to take a wide receiver because that means either New York or Philly's not going to get a wide receiver that they want. And hey, we'll run 4 wide. Let's go.
I mean, that's what we did with Dallas Goedert. That's what you guys did with CeeDee Lamb, to an extent. So,
podium announcements. They can be cringy. They can be epic. We all agree that when Goodell gets up there, we're all Philly at heart. We're going to boo like crazy. That's just how it is. I think he's going to move the chair over that they had in the basement. Maybe he won't get like tanked on air this time.
Yeah,
he was like sloshed after like 2 hours into the chair. So
it's better than Joe Namath.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
Yeah. Or who was it? You guys' kicker that came up and went crazy.
David Akers. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the year after Drew Peterson.
Absolutely. The back and forth. Although I think one of my favorite roasts was Pat McAfee went up there and he's talking about Tennessee. It's like, I talk smack, but didn't have to do a lot of punting whenever we played Tennessee. Dude, savage. All right. Moving right along. These are steals, sleepers, and busts. It's hard to call anybody a bust overall. So this is more about expectations. I think we talked about this before the show. We're going to touch base on day 1, day 2, day 3. What are some people that you wouldn't be surprised if things moved around on? We'll start with day 1 picks. First round only. What do you guys got for me?
I mean, it all depends on where a guy's drafted. Like,
Sure.
One guy I love at linebacker is Zaven Collins. He just reminds me of that classic middle linebacker type mold of that Brian Urlacher, that Ray Lewis. He's a playmaker. He's just always around the football. And he's a guy that I think can come in and just be a Pro Bowler pretty early on. If he's taken in the teens, I think that's good. Good value for him. Anything beyond that, though, I think he's a pretty good steal, in my opinion.
See, I love JOK from Notre Dame, and just watching his highlight tape, I read a stat that he has like the second best coverage grade out of anybody in the draft as a linebacker, which is like insane. To me, and it's interesting, Years ago, if you said a guy was a hybrid in that position, that would be viewed as a weakness. I think in today's NFL, it's almost viewed as a strength in that they can do a lot of things. They can rush, they can cover, all sorts of things. I feel like he's going to go somewhere between 15 to 25, but I think he's a potential top 10 talent with his physical ability and all of that. So whatever team gets him, to me, that's a steal right off the bat.
So, I agree. I wouldn't be surprised with pretty much anything in day one. A couple of thoughts I had for first round. I think Christian Barmore is not a first round talent. I think when you watched him play, he wasn't even a run stopper. They would take him off the field when there were rundowns. So he can get some good push. I think because of the talent of this class, that he might be picked earlier. But I think if you take him in the top 20, you're probably going to be not happy with the results because I don't think he's going to be that every down player. I don't think he's a starter, which if you're picking him in the first round, you want him to be. I've said it before. I think Greg Newsome, if he has a healthy career, when we look back 4 or 5 years from now, we'll say he might have been the best cornerback in this class. So that's an if. So health is always one of those things. So that could be a steal because he may not go until the later rounds. And then Nick Bolton, linebacker, he's probably going to go at the end of the first round. He may not even go in the first round. But he's not going to be the fastest linebacker. But he's going to diagnose the play, fight through traffic, and stop the play quicker than the hyper athlete. So those are my guys day one.
One other guy I want to throw in there is Rashad Bateman. I really look at him, and he reminds me of Michael Thomas on the Saints. Almost just like a lighter version of him. And just the sense that he's not going to be quite as good as Michael Thomas, but he has that same smoothness I see. It's not like great 40 time, but when you put him in pads and you have him run a route, he's just so smooth and can make great catches. He's probably going to be the third, maybe fourth receiver taken, but I think he could be one of the top, if not the top receiver when all's said and done with this class.
I've got Kadarius Toney being taken at the end of the first round, and I think for a team that is in a position to win, he's really going to help them out right away, provide some speed, some playmaking, and I think there's a variety of ways that they're going to be able to use him, maybe even the return game as well. So I think he's a guy that will probably go late first round that I think will make an immediate impact.
Yeah, I was looking at our mocks. I think we all have him at the end of the first round, just a few different teams. So I'll lead off on day two because I want to get my name in before. I think he could go anywhere mid-second to late third. He may even creep into day three. Darius Washington out of TCU, free safety. He's 5'8", 5'9". I think because of his height, he's going to slide down. But he's a solid 180. I've seen him lay the hammer on 200-pound wide receivers. He is not going to be as fast as his back defensive back counterpart, Trevor Mooring, but I think same thing with Nick Bolton. He's a player. He diagnoses and he won't be their fastest. He'll from the snap of the ball. If there's a ball in the air, he will diagnose it and get there across the field before most other DBs would notice it. So there's Washington. That's my sleeper.
By the way, Bob Sanders, remember the safety from the Colts?
Yeah.
He was 5'8".
Wow.
My day two sleeper, I guess I'd call it a sleeper. He might even be into day one for me, but that's just my value. I don't think he'll be drafted day one. Is Elijah Molden from Washington, safety slash nickel back. When I watch tape of him, I just see Tyrann Mathieu. He's just covers the whole inside of the field and can make any kind of play you need. I mean, he's great with his hands after the catch. He can punch it out. He can rip it out. He can lay a big hit, and he grabs interceptions. It's just he's a little undersized. I think he's like 5'10", 5'11", 180, 190 pounds, something like that. So he's not like a JOK type inside player. But he's rangy, and I think he's a player, like I said, like Tyrann Mathieu type role. And I think he can get a lot of turnovers for a team, which, in my opinion, is what defense is all about nowadays.
Okay, so Foose, I think I'm going to step on your toes a little bit because I've got Tommy Trimble's name written down in my notes. A lot of people are making a George Kittle comp. That George Kittle was a guy that maybe didn't have high production in college and then really blossomed in the NFL. And with Trimble's athletic ability, I think a lot of people are seeing that George Kittle comp there. I have Landon Dickerson and Walker Little going in the second and third round. NFL.com put out a mock today where Walker Little went in the third, which is interesting because he's ranked fairly high amongst linemen. So I think those are guys. Man, Travis Etienne is a guy who I think is going to start right away, depending on which team drafts him. There's good running back depth on day 2. I'm of the belief that this year none of those guys should go in the first round, but I think Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, you have 2 running backs from North Carolina who can all probably come in and play right away and be productive on day 2, and I think would be good. But the other guy that I have, and it's interesting, some mocks have him round 3, some have him round 4. I really, really like Kellen Mond. I think of the guys that will go on day 2 or day 3, I think his physical attributes to me, the upside is better than like a Trask or the guy from Stanford. And so I really, really like Kellen Mond, and I think you could see some teams maybe choose not to trade up into the top 10 because they're waiting on a guy like Kellen Mond on day 2 or possibly even day 3.
Chris, why don't you go ahead and keep us going with day 3?
I want to jump right back, though. There was one.
All right.
Chris mentioned him as the guy from Stanford, the quarterback.
Yeah.
But I really like Davis Mills.
Yeah.
5-star recruit coming out, went to Stanford, had to sit the bench a bit. Only has 11 starts, but man, he has a quick release, great accuracy. The question on him, though, is does he have enough experience? And so with the right team, if he can sit behind the right quarterback in a good system, I think he can be a really good pick for someone on day 2.
Yeah, for sure. I think he's one of those guys that really, we've talked about the COVID season a bunch in college football, that I think this would have been a year where he could have maybe improved his stock a little bit and didn't get that opportunity. A lot of people have Amon-Ra St. Brown from USC going in round 4. And I definitely think, I've seen mocks having him go in round 4. So I definitely think he's a day 3 guy. I would not be surprised to see some team say, okay, let's try to move up to the beginning of round 4 to make sure we get him. Just some of the tape, his route running is really, really good. And so I feel like he's a guy you can plug him in and he could probably play right away.
All right, let's keep it rolling. Day 3. That was sort of was that your day 3 pick?
Yeah, that's my day 3 guy. Yeah.
All right, what you got, Foose?
Well, Chris took him earlier, but it all depends where he goes. Tommy Tremble, I like a lot from Notre Dame. Very versatile. He can play that H-back role if your offense rolls that way. Tight end, he's an excellent blocker. Underutilized as a tight end, receiving wise. I mean, Notre Dame's tight end U, and that's just part of the problem. Tommy Tremble just wasn't Notre Dame had elite receiving tight ends with Cole Kmet and the guy that they had last year. His name slips my mind right now. But Tremble was just a guy who did it all. And it's hard to beat that in today's NFL, where you can get a really good receiver, great blocker, and a guy who's just not uncomfortable doing what you ask of him. Another guy that I like is the running back from Oklahoma, Ramondre Stevenson. He reminds me a lot of LeGarrette Blount. And just the way he runs. I think he's not going to be like an amazing running back, but for a day 3 pick, I think he can be a guy that comes in and is a goal line first down specialist. Can give you 500 to 800, maybe 1,000 yards in the right season, and just be a reliable guy in the NFL for years to come.
I'm not going to lie. I know nothing about the running backs in this draft. I haven't paid attention to them at all. That'll be first round. I didn't take a running back in the first round of my mock draft. So, tell you what, just plug somebody in. Just get a good offensive line. Plug somebody in.
Yeah.
That's
that is most of the NFL nowadays. It's just an offensive line.
So I had a couple of thoughts on day three because day three can also spread out. They can be fourth round, they can be seventh round. So it kind of has a wide range there. So sometimes it depends on where these players are taken. Patrick Johnson, the edge rusher out of Tulane, come to think of it. I see him go as high as the fourth round, as late as the sixth round. Anytime you can get edge talent, potential to be worth it in those late rounds. And a couple wide receivers. Of course, big fan of Frank Darby on Arizona State, the speed. But somebody I've seen slipping, even though he had a great Senior Bowl, Shi Smith, wide receiver. I've seen him. It's hard because wide receiver is so deep. It's probably the deepest wide receiver draft we've had in a decade. You know, that is the first round talent, or those three wide receivers, probably comparable, if not even a little bit more talented than last year's set. So, I mean, you're going to find players on day three. You're going to find players in undrafted free agency. I made a note here. We're going to come back to that. So after we do a recap, because we won't know where these players are going or who even might get drafted or signed for undrafted free agency. So, any last thoughts, guys, before we move on to the big finale of our mock drafts?
Yeah, one guy that I like also, you were talking about receivers. And brought him back to my mind is Nico Collins from Michigan. Michigan receivers, I feel like, are just so undervalued because they're just so misused at Michigan. They have a terrible passing offense there. I don't know why receivers go to Michigan. Nico Collins had an opportunity to go to Alabama, passed it up for Michigan. I think it was a huge mistake. He's like 6'4", 220, 230 pounds. Ran like a 4.4 40. Like, he's everything you want body-wise as a receiver, and has some decent highlights. It just didn't have a ton of production because he played at UM. And so he's a guy where you can put him in the right system and just throw it up to him, and he can either be like a goal line asset, or maybe he'll develop and see his potential, because he has all the intangibles. Just needs to be coached up a bit more. You're on mute.
Yeah, John, you're muted.
Good call. So there's definitely a lot of talent. A lot of talent that's going to be at the end of the draft. That's going to be those seventh round picks. Seventh round's that magic round to where who do you not want to fight over an undrafted free agency? And so sometimes you take a Ben DiNucci because your brother coached him in basketball, like when they were kids. And he's clearly, I mean, he's going to have a great career somewhere, just not in professional football. So, you'll have a few of those. Gentlemen, the final mock draft. We're going to start off with rounds, picks 1 through 11, all round 1. The clock has started. Foose, you're right there on the left. We're going to go pick by pick. We're going to talk about who we picked across the board. Pretty straightforward. We see unanimous first two picks. Number 1, Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, I mean, he's the number 1 pick. If they don't take Trevor Lawrence, the Jaguars just shouldn't play football this year.
No.
Yeah, I mean, potential generational talent. It's, no-brainer.
The fact, I'm one of those guys that when I play Madden or NBA 2K, I don't like my careers. They're fine. Give me the franchise building. That's why I like the NCAA 14, which they're bringing it back. Who knows when we're actually going to get a game, but that ability to like franchise build. And I was taking teams like Miami and tanking with them for like 2 years just to wait long enough to draft Trevor Lawrence in the draft. So he's been on since then. since he, a true freshman, won the championship. Sunshine himself, number 1 overall. I don't think Urban Meyer comes out of retirement unless he's coaching Trevor Lawrence. That was totally tied together. The guy who had the rise, number 2 overall, to the Jets, who is probably not going to have the career he should because of where he's going, Zach Wilson at BYU.
So we talked about expectations earlier, and
Yeah.
I'll tell you guys, having lived and grown up in New Jersey, I remember when they got Brett Favre, billboard went up on the New Jersey Turnpike, then it got taken down, then a Mark Sanchez billboard went up when he got drafted, and then it came down. And so I know the Zach Wilson billboard is going to go up on the New Jersey Turnpike probably pretty soon. And, man, the expectations are super high. And, we talked about it, I think, maybe the last time we were together. 1 year wonder, you just don't know. And I think it's going to take them a while to build up a team that can compete, with Buffalo. So, you just don't know.
But you got to take the talent while you're up there.
For sure.
Although,
Yeah.
with a lot of these teams, you never know if you're going to be up there again. Unfortunately for New York, they're up here quite a bit. So, any thoughts on Zach Wilson, Foos, before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I think you and Chris hit on all the points I'm going to cover. I mean, 1 year wonder. He has all the intangibles. Going from Utah to New York's a big step up. It's just going to wait and see.
Yeah. And third overall, this is where we have our first difference. Of course, you guys both with Mac Jones. Why don't you guys tell me why you went there?
Yeah,
I went there because I feel like all the rumors are going that way.
Yeah.
I would go Justin Fields here, but it seems like Shanahan wants Mac Jones in his offense. He's frustrated with Jimmy G not seeing the whole field, and Mac Jones is a guy who has a super high completion percentage and is a pretty good game manager. And it seems like that's what he wants. And so that pendulum swinging from one side to the other, and you're getting Mac Jones at 3.
Yeah, I feel like I've read that the front office is deferring to Shanahan on this pick, and that Shanahan loves Mac Jones. I'm with you, Foos. I think Fields should be the pick here. I think you could argue that Fields can maybe be the pick at 2, but I think Fields should be the pick here. And, going back to talking about bust, Mac Jones, if you're drafting him in the 20s, there's a certain expectation that he'll probably live up to. Man, drafting him number 3 and giving up the picks that you gave up to get there, I just don't know that he ever lives up to that expectation.
Yeah. And I think you guys will probably be right on this pick. I just can't in good conscience put him at number 3 overall. Now, here's why I think you're right. I heard recently John Lynch do an interview. He's like, hey, we're good. Shanahan likes his guy. And so he's already distancing himself from the pick. Like, hey, guys, I know. But I have heard that when they did interview, because he has had conversations with Shanahan, Trey Lance, that is. And from what I hear, he's been wowing them in the boardrooms. Like, he's a great interviewer. He had a good impression. As recently as the past couple of days, they've said they don't know who they're taking yet, which, whatever. We'll see about that. But
We might all be dead in a few days, so.
yeah,
None of this really matters, right?
Right. Well, then I don't have to worry about editing this video afterwards, because it'll save me some time for sure. So, and that's where we're going to see our first domino. Chris, you said it on our very first episode. San Francisco determines this draft.
Yes.
Then this is the first place where you see it potentially weave off. And there are a couple more spots in the top 10 where I think it's not just one pick just creates okay, everybody moves a spot down. There are different roads we're going to potentially go down to. But across the board, 4th overall, this is where the quarterbacks are done. Talent wins out. We all have Kyle Pitts going to the Falcons. Did anyone consider doing a trade out or picking somebody else?
A trade out after what San Francisco gave up for number 3. I can't see anybody being able to try to match that to get to 4. And I don't think the Falcons will end up moving. Pitts just seems like a lock here to me.
Yeah, I just feel like if you don't, so if you're Atlanta, you don't have a quarterback that you love, you have potentially a generational tight end. For the next year, you can just say, okay, we're going to let Matt Ryan air it out to Ridley, to Julio Jones, and to Kyle Pitts. We're going to see what happens. And if it doesn't work out at the end of the year, we'll move on from Matt Ryan. We'll trade Julio Jones, and maybe we'll look for our quarterback next year. I just think that's the direction they'll go in.
Yeah, agreed. And it seems like we're all on the same page with number 5 overall, Cincinnati taking Ja'Marr Chase. Going to reunite LSU alum.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I've heard 2 things. I've heard from 2 different draft people who I follow quite close. I've heard they also like Penei Sewell, really high on that tackle. They really like him. But the person who I've seen be most frequently accurate has Ja'Marr Chase going. As in, like, other than the top 2 quarterbacks, he thinks this is the most certain pick that's out there.
I mean, I think they like Joe Burrow having good knees, but they also like Ja'Marr Chase. I would take Sewell, but Chase is the pick I think they'll make.
Yeah, I've heard the comp I've heard a lot is Anquan Bolden, but more speed. And so it's, that you want to protect his knees, but man, that's a hard guy to turn down. So I think they'll go Chase.
Then looks like me and Foose are together with Miami sticking with Jalen Waddle, number 6 overall. But Chris, you went with Penei Sewell. So thoughts on why you went with the tackle here?
Speaking of protecting knees, in the spirit of protecting knees, Tua's a guy with an injury history, and he's your long-term guy that you're invested in. That's an important position to have kind of nailed down, and so that's why I went Penei Sewell there. I like Jalen Waddle. I just don't know that I like him that high, so I think they'll go Sewell.
Yeah, I heard rumors that they were trying to get up for Ja'Marr Chase. And so originally, before I saw the Denver trade, I actually had Miami dropping back to Denver coming up and getting Justin Fields once they realized they couldn't get Ja'Marr Chase. So I think I could be thrown either way. My thought was, okay, there's some depth with offensive line, and they have another first-round pick later on down the board. And maybe they could come back and get their offensive lineman there as well. But that was my thought process. What about you, Foose?
Yeah, I think, too, they want to they really want Tua to evolve into the quarterback that, last year it used to be tank for Tua before everything happened. But I really think that they want to get him comfortable, and they want to bring talent around him. Yeah, they brought in a few guys at receiver, but I just think they see an opportunity here with Waddle that they jump at. It's not one I'd make, but I think it's the one that they do.
Next, number 7 overall. This is where we have a couple of different QBs go off the board. Foose, keep it rolling. Tell us about your trade up with Washington.
Yeah, Washington's a team I see at the quarterback position where they have a huge question mark. They have Fitzpatrick, who's, you know what you're getting with him, but that's for a year. You have Heineke, who had 1 game. I don't think Ron Rivera is going to bank on that. I think he would rather invest in a young quarterback like Trey Lance. He has time to sit under Fitzpatrick, can even come in late in the season. We saw that with Tua last year when he sat underneath Fitzpatrick. And a team like the Dolphins, who also had that playoff opportunity, and the same thing is there with Washington. And so to me, the Lions are a team I don't think that they're going to take a quarterback now that they have Goff. They have near 0 receivers that are relevant. And to draft a quarterback there and have like no talent around him beside Hawkinson, I don't think is a good idea. And so I think they're going to go trade back, get some more draft capital, try to build up receivers, try to build up everything there in Detroit. And Washington's, I think, a team that's looking to move up, take one of these quarterbacks that starts to fall. And I think Lance is their guy.
And Chris, you decided that Detroit doesn't believe in Jared Goff and is going to pull the trigger on Trey Lance.
So I believe Trey Lance is a project. To me, he's a high risk, high reward guy. We're not going to know for a few years what Trey Lance is. I mean, one of the few, I guess, one positive you can say about Mac Jones, while his ceiling is not that high, I think we would all say, okay, we know what Mac Jones is, at least. You know, we kind of have an expectation of what we think he'll be. So Trey Lance has some time to develop. I read somewhere Detroit can get out of Jared Goff's contract after the 2022 season with a minimal cap hit. Yeah. And so to me, you know, are you banking on Jared Goff, who, you know, lost his starting job with the Rams? I don't even remember their backup quarterback's name, which is terrible. Do you guys remember the backup in with the Rams?
No, but I remember they had some guy who came off the street, right? Like he came out of school.
And so I can't believe that Detroit is saying our window is now.
Walford.
Yeah, our window is now, and so we've got to build around Jared Goff. I more see it as, hey, we can get a guy that we can stick behind Goff for maybe a year. Maybe toward the end of the year we could put him in, and then, you know, Goff can be the backup for year 2, and then we can kind of move on from him. I just think if he's there, they'll probably I could see them taking him.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. Especially you're never going to be upset that you had extra quarterbacks. We saw New England flip quarterbacks for backup quarterbacks.
You can be upset you have extra quarterbacks, but
no. Here's the frame. See, Foos, the idea was multiple like serviceable quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Just because they play a position doesn't necessarily mean they have value. So I did something that I don't believe is going to happen whatsoever, but I think should happen, which I think New England, if you see Justin Fields fall to 7, should be rolling up and getting him. Now, originally I had another team trading up. I don't think Miami's going to trade with New England the same way division rivals wouldn't. So they're going to come up and get Justin Fields. Cam is not the guy long term. He just physically can't hang the same way. Justin Fields can be there, develop, and then Belichick has his I'm going to prove Tom wrong QB. Now, I also cannot imagine New England trading up for anybody, but I definitely think they should. So that's why I went Justin Fields. I agree with what we talked about before. I think he should be number 3, possibly even number 2, but
yeah,
draft be crazy, yo.
Yeah, it's the Lions. There's a lot of options. They have a lot of holes.
Yeah,
they have a brand new GM and coaching staff, so it'll be interesting to see what they do. I think they're definitely a team that can trade back. And same with the next pick with the Panthers.
And I'll even say, Foos, I think they should trade back. I really do think they should trade back. They're going to be rebuilding for a couple years. I think they should do that. I'm just interested to see if they will. Yeah.
I think they're one of those teams that's probably going to be back up in the 7-1 range again next year.
Yeah, I agree.
Looking at their roster. But yeah, down to the Panthers at 8. They
we two of us had trades. Foos, you had Chicago wanted to just crowd that QB room as much as possible.
Gotta love it. I can't imagine Matt Nagy was actually serious when he said that they had found their guy, and I can't even remember his name now. He was your quarterback last year.
Andy Dalton. Yeah.
The Red Rifle.
That's how good he is. Like, Pace and Nagy are on the hot seat. and they're going to be rolling with Andy Dalton. Like, there's no way.
So here's my thing.
There's just no way. I think they're willing to give up whatever it takes to move up and take a guy like Justin Fields, who they know can come in and win them some games.
And sell some hope.
Yeah,
I think Chicago should do that. I read that they didn't even go to Trey Lance's pro day, and so that kind of blew my mind. That they're in a team where I agree that Nagy is on the hot seat. How are you not going to all 5 of these guys' pro days and then just calling up each team and seeing what you can do? So what you have, I feel like they should do it. I'm just not convinced that they will do it,
What are the odds they draft Fields like this, and then they have a couple of backup QBs, crowded room, and then they flip it? Maybe that's their play. They flip one of those other backup QBs for like a late round pick.
I mean, it's easy to flip Foles. He's been flipped quite a few times. Dalton, I think, staying, but it's. I just can't see Chicago.
Who's Kansas City's backup?
Chad Henne.
Yeah, Chad Henne.
Chad Henne.
Reuniting with Andy Reid. All right. I actually had a trade up there as well. So it's not unknown that Justin Herbert has been pounding the table to get his Oregon teammate Penei Sewell. If he's dropping down this far, I wanted to see some movement. I wanted to see some fun. I think you have Carolina, who's wanting to get out of that pick. If one of those top QBs is not there, so they try to get out. And I've heard that they're trying to get down just a couple picks, not jump too far. So that's where I ended up putting them, and you'll see how I set up their pick later on. But you get the Chargers, they can get their left tackle, they can get their teammates back together. To me, that's a storybook. It's probably not going to happen. You'll hear me say that a lot today. But I think that is a solid pickup for them.
I'd read that storybook.
Yeah.
See,
a lot of alumni that we have that I have on my box of reuniting. But that's probably a product of, hey, if you're good talent, you're going to go to big programs and you're going to play together. So, take it away, Chris.
Yeah, I've got Slater going to Carolina, and Carolina basically doing for Sam Darnold what the Jets never did, putting pieces around him and all of that. So you have a key piece on your line that can protect him. They've already got some weapons on that team that he can throw to. To me, if you're going to trade for Darnold, give him every chance to succeed. And this, to me, is giving him every chance to succeed.
Agreed. I think they would love that pick if they got there.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you're going to have some teams that have Slater ahead of Sewell, Penei Sewell. Dyslexic reading today. Moving right along. Man, if we might just take this entire hour just going through these picks. We'll go
I'll
right
speed
into
it up. I mean, I got Sewell here at tackle for 9 with the Broncos. It's just best player available.
Yeah.
I think the Broncos are one of those teams that they're steady Eddie. They're just going to sit there at their pick and just take best player available, and I see that being Sewell here.
And Chris, that's where you have New England coming up. Looks like
Yeah.
we're on the same page, the same location, just when they come up.
So, John, you said earlier that you can't imagine New England trading up for a quarterback. And any other year, I would agree with you. But, man, they spent a lot of money in free agency this past offseason. And we can debate on how well they spent that money. But they spent a lot of money. And so I feel like Belichick, is kind of pushing 70 at this point. I think his window is now. I think he'd like to win sooner rather than later. And everything I'm reading is that they love Fields. And so I think Fields is their guy they'd like to trade up for. For Denver, the guy that I have them picking a little later on, I think will actually still be on the board at 15. So it works out for them. They get their guy that they wanted anyways, and they get to acquire more draft capital. But any other year, I agree. I don't see New England trading up. I think this is the year. I think they love Fields, and so I see them pulling the trigger here.
Yeah. No, I think they should.
Yeah.
But it's one of those, the same reason you're going to see my pick for number 10 for Dallas is if an organization's shown a trend for a long period of time, You got to prove me wrong before I believe you're going to do something else. So that's Micah Parsons. I think with the quarterbacks wiped out for Denver, I think they need linebacker. They need some playmakers on that defense. I could easily see them going quarterback here as well. So I could see them taking Surtain as well. But Micah Parsons, if he off-field issues, stay to a minimum. If he buys in, he has that potential to be a top 5 linebacker in the NFL potential, and so I think that's where those traits kick in.
Yeah.
And then number 10 across the board, Dallas, number 10 with a bullet.
I mean, I feel like when Jerry Jones makes statements like we're going to take the best defensive player available, and it's not going to be a guy who sat out this past year. I don't know. I just kind of take him at face value. Like, Jerry's a guy that's just kind of flat out just says what he's going to do sometimes.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think you guys need help in the pass protection, and Surtain's the top guy. I just think it's an easy pick.
I don't think the question of would it be him? I think the question is if he lasts to there.
Yeah, to me, that's the only way he's not the guy, is if somebody jumps up and takes him.
Or unless you have Pitts fall. Something like crazy like that happen. Not going to happen.
Yeah.
However, I do think the 2 offensive linemen should be rated above them. However, rumors I'd hear, if Sewell fell, they might lean that way because he could play guard, eventually swing over to tackle. But I don't know that they feel that same way about Slater because they see him as a guard, even though they've compared him to, hey, this is the next Zach Martin where you play tackle and then switch over to guard. So, yeah, it's Surtain unless the decision is made for them or unless there's something completely obvious that even Jerry can't mess it up. And then we all went the same thing with number 11 overall with the New York wide receivers. I really think it's a coin flip with these 2 Alabama wide receivers.
Yeah.
See, we didn't talk about busts in the one segment, but Jalen Waddle's my bust. I don't like drafting receivers in the first round primarily on speed. You look back at all the guys that's happened to, and it just doesn't end well for them. I like Smith. I mean, just incredible production. People have compared him to like Marvin Harrison. I mean, his weight's low, but you'd have to think a guy playing in the NFL, working out with NFL teams, he's going to get bigger. I mean, you can say that about Alabama too. I think he said the other day, we're not weightlifters, we're NFL players. Ultimately, though, the Giants, they need to make sure that Daniel Jones is their guy, and so they're just going to put talent around him.
I think for Waddle, this would be a good situation because I think he doesn't have to be the number 1 guy. They signed Kenny Golladay, and in a lot of ways, he's kind of the complement to Kenny Golladay, that he can be their deep threat and all of that. It's tough, Foose. In some ways, I agree. Some people have made the Tyreek Hill comparisons, and I almost feel like that's not fair to Waddle to almost put that on him before he even plays a game, to say, oh, he's Tyreek Hill and all that. But I mean, I think we're mostly on the same page. They'll go receiver here for sure.
Yeah, they want to stretch the field, and so one way or the other, they need some weapons to do so. I almost put Slater here. However, they've invested in the offensive line. Doesn't mean it's paid off for them, but
they drafted Andrew Thomas last year,
who is probably a lot of people's 4th or 5th best tackle, but they're like, no, so we won. And they had who's the guard they took in the 2nd round a couple of years ago? Maybe it was late first.
Hernandez, yeah.
Because he was linked to Dallas. He worked out with Dallas for a while as well. So yeah, same page. Let's keep this rolling, moving right along as we're burning through 12 through 21. Foose and your Philly Eagles are on the clock.
Yeah, J.C. Horn is my pick here at 12. I think we desperately need defensive backs. We have a brand new defensive coordinator, and our depth chart at defensive backs is so thin. Darius Slay's our best player, and he's on the downward slope of his career. Best player available. I think he is probably the best player available, at least on my board. There's so many different rumors you hear, whether it's, Philly always loves drafting offensive or defensive linemen, and Kwity Paye's been put here. I can't see a guy like Slater, unless they wanted him at guard, going here. And anyone else, it really is just like you can trade back for someone if you value them. I could see them trading up for Surtain above Dallas, but if you're staying here, Surtain's gone, Horn's available. It would come down to him, Smith, or Waddle for me, and Horn's the last guy I have, so that's who I went with.
Yeah. And I like that you poo-pooed all over my pick already. I did take Rashawn Slater for you guys because I think you do. You play him at guard. I think he's one of those plug and play. He is that Zach Barton, who's probably going to be Pro Bowler his first year. And I saw your guards that try to get lost for the middle of plays and give up during the season. So I thought, let's help him out. If you could tell, let me ask you this first.
Yeah.
If you could know, I can get a Zach Martin right here, or I could risk it on J.C. Horn, who has high upside. If you could guarantee it was Zach Barton-esque, would that change your mind?
I just don't know. There's some guys later that I really like that you can take, I think, for guard. Guy I really like is Creed Humphrey, if we're to do a 2-round or 3-round mock. He's a guy you can play at guard and move to center once Jason Kelsey retires. Same with that guy from Wisconsin Whitewater, like Quinn Minarez or something like that.
Quinn Myers, he was like a pro Senior Bowl invite,
Yeah. A guy like him, play guard and move to center, type of thing. The Eagles, though, like they had Mailata, left tackle. They have Lane Johnson at right, and then you have Andre Dillard, who was a tackle they drafted first round back in 2019, I think it was. He could be a guy that they actually trade during the draft, but I just don't think that they're going to want to add another guy that in that tackle at this high. The Eagles, it seems like to draft tackles, guards later and develop them. I mean, we have an amazing offensive line coach in Jeff Stoutland. We got guys like Driscoll and Herbig last year who we drafted late, like day 3, day 2, and they came in and were very capable starters. And so I think that's what's going to end up happening here. But anything could happen. They could draft Slater, and I wouldn't be too upset with the pick. But I think a guard type player that you want to start now is available later.
Gotcha. And Chris, you went with Smith here. Slides on down to Philly. It feels like a pick they would love as well.
Yeah, I think they would. We were just saying that the Giants need to kind of figure out Daniel Jones this year and all of that. I think for Philly this year, you kind of have to figure out Jalen Hurts. Is he going to be your guy moving forward? And you're putting kind of one of the top receivers in this draft, on that offense and saying, okay, we're surrounding you with another weapon. Let's see what you can do this year. And so I think, if it doesn't work out with Hurts, like you lose nothing with this pick. You have a guy who's going to have a long, productive NFL career. Hopefully, I think all three of us agree with that. So I think like it helps you kind of figure out, okay, is Hurts our guy? And if he's not, you have a guy that you're going to have for a long time.
And just jumping in quick, both Smith and Waddle are guys that played with Hurts at Alabama.
Yeah.
Before Hurts transferred to Oklahoma, so he's familiar with them. It could be an easy fit for either of them there.
Well, I'll kick it off at 13 and let you know this was tied into a trade I built in earlier. Carolina wants to come back. They want to still try to target a cornerback. I've heard they are in love with J.C. Horn. So original mock I had J.C. Horn before them trading out. So there's a scenario that both quarterbacks are gone before we even get to number 10. So I still wanted to pair those together. I did consider going back and forth, throwing J.C. Horn here as well. I do think that would potentially be the pick. But the story is, and continues to be, Carolina or J.C. Horn fans. So,
Yeah, I have Horn here at 13 as well, but with the Chargers staying there. And, we've talked about this before. The gap between Surtain and Horn, I don't think is that big. And so I think this is a great pick for them if they can get him, here in a lot of ways. I think he could go earlier. I just really think the Giants and the Eagles are both going to go receiver if Waddle and Smith are both there, which kind of leaves Horn falling to 13.
Yeah, I have Slater here. I think they want Sewell. I just don't think they're going to want to trade up and lose that value to go get him. I think they have a guy in Herbert who he's your franchise QB. You want to protect him, but you also want to be able to build around him, and you don't want to give up a ton of talent just to grab a guy because he was playing with him in college when you can get a guy in Slater and not have to give up that talent. Assuming that Slater's still here, though.
yeah. And I think if Slater's here, they're a high five across the board. Like I said, some people got Slater ranked higher up. So let's keep it rolling on down to 14 in Minnesota. Looks like me and Chris went the same thing here with Christian Darrisaw. I do think they are desperate for offensive line help. Fusi went Elijah Vera Tucker. I don't think that's bad at all. I think some people might even have him as one of the top ranked offensive linemen on the board. So I don't think there's a wrong pick here.
Yeah,
but they definitely want to get a tackle here. Any reason why I'm also high on Vera Tucker as well. Any reason you picked him over Darrisaw?
I've just seen some people that are really high on him. I think it gets to the point here where, it's not Slater, it's not Sewell, and you're going to have a lot of variance in who you think's the 3 through whatever 5, 6, 7, 8 with tackles here. And I just picked a guy. I think he's very versatile. At USC, played guard and then moved outside to tackle and played really well as well. And Vikings need help, so I think they go Vera Tucker. But yeah, I could easily see Darrisaw as well. All depends where their board is.
Sure. And then let's keep on rolling down through 15. We're right. Both you guys had Micah Parsons. My original mock, I had New England taking Micah Parsons here as well. I think that's the stop of the slide for him. If he does continue to slide there. Through the trades from Detroit coming down, put JOK because Detroit just needs talent. Yeah. So you get somebody who I think you don't want to do what Arizona did last year and get that versatile player and not have a position for him in mind. But JOK, you can plug anywhere on that defense for Detroit, and you've got a playmaker immediately. But Micah Parsons on either one of those spots. Again, we talked about it earlier with high upside. You guys' overall impressions of Parsons?
I think Belichick just goes out and gets his closest thing to Lawrence Taylor.
Yeah.
That he had in New York. You had those character things with Micah, and sometimes people just need a change of location. New England, I think, is a place where he can go, and I think he's going to get that good support. But more than he's just an incredible athlete, and I think Belichick's being the coach that he is would probably love to get a guy like Parsons in.
Yeah, I feel like with Parsons, he's a guy, if not for the character issues, is probably a top 10 pick. The ability, all of those kinds of things. I think Denver likes him at 9, but because of the slide, I think they can get him at 15. They can trade back, get some more draft capital, and still get their guy in Micah Parsons.
Which I had them picking up at 9 as well.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how many of these picks we get that are right, but just the wrong order.
Yeah.
So,
and I think Denver could easily go Parsons as well.
Yeah. So the rumors are there for a reason. There's a reason we mock people at certain places, but it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. Now, we all went quarterback for Arizona, definitely with the departure of Peterson, definitely a need on that back end. Now, you guys both went with the perceived risk of Farley, who, of course, if injuries weren't an issue, he would be the first cornerback overall taken off the board. I've already expressed my love for Greg Newsome. So you guys felt safe at 16 overall with Farley.
So I actually don't feel safe. It's more what I think they'll do.
Okay.
You know, I think he's a guy, man, just with repeated injuries, that scares me. If I'm one of these teams, he's a guy that if he's there in the 20s, I think about trading back in to try and grab him. I think this is high, but John, you just mentioned it. They lost Peterson. I think they're looking to win now, and they might say, hey, if we hit on this pick and he ends up being a top 5 talent like we think he can be, it might go. It's tough. I'm not comfortable with it, but I could see them doing it, you know?
I just realized I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth because earlier I mentioned if Greg Newsome stays healthy, he'll have an amazing career. However, it's the same thing, so maybe you take the higher upside.
Yeah.
I just think teams might be scared off a little bit more, but I don't think that's a wrong time to take a risk.
Farley's just had so many injury things.
Yeah.
Without those, he would be the top defensive back. I think Arizona's just looking for a Patrick Peterson replacement, and he's the closest physical thing you have to that. Is it worth the risk here at 16? Maybe, because I think the talent drop-off kind of starts around here from the rest of it, but is it a pick I would make? Probably not.
So moving right along, I think we have our first big jump in Foos taking Eric Stokes to Vegas. Almost called him Oakland. Vegas with Eric Stokes from Georgia, the Speed Demon.
They might be in Vegas, but they're still the Raiders, and they're still going to do Raider things.
That's fair.
So it's just like, okay, who are the Raiders going to take 3 rounds early or 2 rounds early? Or I've even seen some mocks with Stokes in the early second. So I have no idea where to put him, but he runs like a 4.2 something speed, and they're like, oh, well, we like that. Yeah, I think the Raiders will take him.
Chris?
Here it's just...
I guess I gave the Raiders a lot of slack here because I have them making a kind of conservative move, in my opinion, and taking Vera Tucker, who, again, I think John said it earlier, he's a plug-and-play guy. You can put in there right away and all that. Could potentially play multiple positions, play guard and tackle. And so I think that there's not a lot of risk in that pick. So maybe I'm giving Gruden a lot more credit than I should, but that's what I think they'll end up doing.
Not gonna lie, guys, had no idea what to do with Oakland.
Yeah,
I was just like, I see safety as a need.
You mean Vegas?
Yeah, Vegas. At least it's not the Washington thing. So I'm like, Trevor Moring. Most people have a number 1 safety overall. He could go in the top 20. He could fall to 25. I don't really see him going beyond 25. However, and it made more sense for the rest of my draft for Vegas to just make dumb picks. Same thing with you. So I could turn around and give Miami Elijah Vera Tucker to follow up with the offensive lineman. It made the most sense at 18. So I let them not be smart.
A great pick.
Yeah.
If he made it there, that'd be
yeah,
a great pick
I agree.
Yeah.
I have him going Jalen Phillips. I think they need some more edge stuff, some more edge guys. Hometown Miami guy, and I mean he just is, I think, shooting up draft boards with his last year of play without Rousseau and with his pro day, and so Miami has a few picks. I think they'll go edge here. Could be Pay, but I think Phillips is their guy.
Yeah, I had Pay, also realizing the need for edge. Pay is one of the hardest guys to do a mock draft for because he, has been rumored as high as Philly at 12. He's been rumored as low as somewhere in the high 20s. So his range is really, really big. And I think we can agree this is probably a weaker draft for edge rushers. And so it's hard to evaluate, okay, So, let's say Pay and Phillips are the top two guys. So we know they're 1 and 2 somehow, but where do they rank with all the other prospects on the board? I had a really hard time trying to decide where Pay would go, but seeing Miami's need, I put Pay there at 18.
And I'm going to steal the thunder a little bit here for number 19, because Washington is going to get their quarterback. And a reasonable draft spot for him. Mac Jones goes 19 number overall to the football team in Washington. Is he just Daniel Jones, by the way?
Daniel Jones can run, though.
Okay, so he's less talented.
I think Mac Jones is a better thrower than Daniel Jones. But.
Fair. But remember, like, the scrutiny that we gave New York then, I think when you have Mac Jones go number 3 overall to San Fran, I think it's going to be looked at the same way. Look at who New York could have had instead. So I think that's if you get a QB to fall in your lap there from Washington, you don't have to trade up to get him. I think that's a good fit. Chris, you got JOK.
Have to trade up if that's the case.
Originally, I had Chicago jumping them up to Miami, but I already had Miami trade. I'm like, I'm not going to do a double trade. But I would definitely see Chicago jumping them.
It's interesting, John. Like, if Jones were to fall to 19, I don't think that's a bad pick there. They're not giving up any draft capital. I've heard some people say that the ceiling for Mac Jones is probably Kirk Cousins. Like, that's probably the best case scenario. And on a team like that, okay, I can see it. I hate the pick at 3 if San Francisco takes him there. But at 19, you're not giving anything up. I don't think it's a bad move. I have them basically making their great defense even greater. And I would say, as a Cowboys fan, I would actually hate this pick if they were to add JOK to everything that they already have. That is not a defense I would want to see 2 times a year. Rivera's a defensive-minded coach, and I could really see him saying at this point of the draft, you know what, let's bring in Davis Mills, Kellen Mond, Kyle Trask. Let's bring in a guy like that. Let's not waste the draft capital and just kind of see where we are.
You mean I can get myself a Luke Kuechly all over again, but even more able to cover?
Yeah.
I could easily see that. Then we got Foose. Washington's not here anymore because they traded up.
Yeah, I have the Lions here trading back, and it's just whatever. With them at this pick, it's just their need. They need Bateman. They need a receiver, and Bateman's their guy, I think, here. If they trade back, that is. I like Bateman. I talked about that earlier, but the Lions have a lot of needs. I don't think it matters who their quarterback is. He's not going to be successful unless he has some decent receivers. And so I think Bateman will probably go somewhere in this range. I see, John, you have him at 20 and Chris has him at 21. So I think we kind of all agree somewhere late teens, early 20s for him.
Yeah. And then you turn right around and Carolina, Greg Newsome. Both of you guys were Greg Newsome, but for different teams. So at number 20 overall, I think what you said already, Carolina needs talent as well. Chicago needs quarterbacks. I had taken Newsome earlier, so I didn't have Chicago taking a quarterback here because we probably would have been there had I not picked him earlier. But so I went with Rashad Bateman there. So just a couple of different switches. Chris, any thoughts on Greg Newsome? Was it a specific thought there, or just like, oh, Chicago needs a cornerback?
They need a cornerback, local guy who went to Northwestern, and I think the upside is there. You just hope he can stay healthy, like we've talked about with him. And so it's, if he had a better injury history, he's probably a higher pick, the 20. Yeah. And so Chicago can kind of take a chance there and hope that he, stays healthy.
And why don't you just go on to your number 21 overall?
Yeah, I like Bateman a lot too. Foose has talked about him a bunch. Colts are in an interesting situation. They have Carson Wentz for the foreseeable future. I know they got Pittman, I think, in the second round last year. T.Y. Hilton's getting old, and so I think Bateman can come in and be a difference maker right away. And kind of what we've talked about with a few of these quarterbacks of, okay, let's put Carson in the best situation possible and see if he's our guy long term. And if he's not, you work that out down the road. But Bateman, I think at 21 is a really good value, so I think they go there.
Yeah, it looks like we all had him 19, 20, then 21, so probably going to be in that range. And then Fusi went with Darrisaw there. I think.
Yeah, I went with Newsome at 20, and then Darrisaw at 21. I think wherever Carolina drafts, just look at their division, look at the NFC South and the receivers that are there. They're going to need guys to cover if they want to stand a chance in that division. I think the Colts, they know who Wentz is. They know the issues that he has and the ability that he has as well. And they just lost, was it Anthony Costanzo at tackle? I think it was them. And so they need some more protection for Wentz. I read Chris Ballard, their GM, was talking about Wentz, and he's like, let's just be real. Our team's going to go how Wentz goes, and if he's healthy, we're going to be doing pretty well. And I think he even compared it to Tampa Bay, or no, the Chiefs, and how watching Patrick Mahomes down on the ground so much during the Super Bowl, you need your quarterbacks to be able to stay upright. Maybe that wasn't him, and maybe I'm just meshing stuff together because there's been so many different things like that going on this week. But I think they're going to draft the best tackle available. I think that's Darrisaw here.
I think that's fair. And who is the guard they took a couple of years ago? First round?
The guard they took a couple of years ago was Quentin Nelson.
Yeah. So just adding
and
more.
They said they're not going to move him to tackle. He's going to stay at guard.
Okay.
I think that's smart for them. I just wonder if Andrew Luck sees all this happening now. And just like, where was this?
I heard a rumor that
they contacted him to make sure he wasn't
Luck
gonna. Yeah, before they traded for Wentz.
They traded for Wentz.
Yeah,
like,
I believe that.
How's it going?
I know it's a bad breakup. Hey,
thinking
I'm
about you.
Just thinking about you. Starting to talk to somebody else, but just wanted to see where you're at. I know you said you wanted to give it some space, but I'm still here. So, yeah. This next pick, guys, I specifically did it just so we could talk about the rumor. They came out, the news report that Rappaport put out, that Fusi sent over to our group text, that rumor is New Orleans is considering trading up to get in front of Tennessee to get Caleb Farley. So let's talk about it. I really don't see Farley getting out of 22-25 range. And for so many quarterback needy teams, somebody's going to eventually pull the trigger. So whether that be Arizona or anybody else up there, I would be surprised. But New Orleans, again, you talked about it earlier, NFC South.
Yeah.
Got to get people that can cover. And after you get out of the 20s, risk starts becoming negotiable. I don't know if they'll do it, but we did hear that rumor, so we'll see how that plays out. But you never know how much is smoke.
This late in the rumor mill, I feel like it's just guys like the Saints are like, oh, we want like Asante Samuel Jr. or someone like that, and they're like, let's just see how we can try to stack the draft in our favor so that happens.
Yeah.
But this is speculation.
We'll keep it on rolling. And so I almost went wide receiver at 22 for Tennessee, just because of the way I played out receivers earlier. They also need O-line help. So this was really one of those darts I threw. I'm not 100% sold on the idea of this, but you guys both went Elijah Moore.
Moore's just a guy who can do quite a few things in an offense. He's a gadget type player. He's great in the slot. I believe he even does returns. I think he'd be a good complement in that offense, and they need more receiver help now that Corey Davis is gone. I know they're completely different molds, But if Tennessee, they've had a window open for a Super Bowl run these last few years, and if they want to keep that open, I think they're going to need to take a receiver here to try to get some more talent around Tannehill and Henry.
Yeah, I feel the same way, Foose. He's a guy that's rising up draft boards. I feel like over the past couple of months, every week it feels like he's rising up, and they don't really have a guy like him. They don't have that kind of do-it-all receiver and all of that. I completely agree. I think their window is a few years. You want to maximize that offense while Derrick Henry is in his prime. We started this pod talking about the short lifespan of running backs, right? So like you want to take advantage now of having a running back like that, and I just think he's a great compliment for them.
Yeah. My only counter, and I do believe that's true, they need wide receiver help. My thought process here, as I don't hear what you guys talk about, reminds me, it's wide receiver depth is available. And we saw it with Zeke. Your offensive line gets hurt. Really hard to run where there aren't holes to run.
Yeah.
So taking advantage of that strength, build on strength on strength. I don't think Dallas did that as much as they needed to when they had that type of game rolling for a while. But I don't think there's a wrong pick. They just need talent either way. So number 23, the Jets come back around. And I think we all picked an edge rusher here. It just depends on how these war rooms feel about a player. We talked about it earlier. Kwity Paye could be high, could be low. I've heard the kid from Penn State, Chris, who you picked, I've heard him be ranked as the top one as well. So you mentioned it earlier. There's not really a number one clear overall. There's not a Myles Garrett. There's not a Jadeveon Clowney. There's not one of these records that's the clear number one overall. They're all just in a pack together. Doesn't mean there's not talent there, but it's really going to be pick your flavor with these teams.
To me, it seems like a lot of raw talent of guys that need to be developed.
Yeah, I agree.
And it'll just be interesting. I didn't know where to put Paye in this draft. Joe Douglas comes from their GM up in New York. Comes from the Eagles, who love to draft edge guys. Combine that with Robert Saleh, being a defensive guy, drafting edge guys with the 49ers. And I think Kwity Paye is a guy that I've heard compared to Brandon Graham, actually. And so I think that's attractive to them, and I think it's good value here at 23. So I don't know if Paye will last this long or not, but I think the Jets will go defensive here, probably edge rusher, whether it's the Penn State guy or Paye or even Phillips or Rousseau, whichever they value more.
Yeah, it's tough. I had Paye off the board at this point. I agree with the point about Saleh is that he's a defensive-minded coach, and so I think he would love the idea of I can draft an edge that I can develop. I had a few of the boards I looked at had Owe ahead of Jalen Phillips, and so that's why I have him going to the Jets here. But yeah, I think they definitely go edge at 23.
Then as we keep going down the board, Pittsburgh, who we're gonna have a little bit of argument here, Chris. Here's my thing. I understand they're trying to replace running back. I get your thought here. It doesn't matter what kind of car you got if you ain't got gas in the tank.
Yes.
So if you got nowhere to run, it doesn't matter who you put in the backfield. We've already talked about before. Now, I like Tevin Jenkins. He's 6'6". He's a big kid, 3.5-inch arms. And really what stood out to me is when he just seems like that Pittsburgh type of player. Like, it just feels gritty. Like, he feels like that type of player. Pro comparisons for him, Joe Thuney. I mean, if you line that up right there, I think it's a good spot. If they address the offensive line at all, I think they'll be there. So, what are your thoughts here on Harris? Was this like, hey, I feel like I need to put a running back
So
in here?
I'll say this.
Yeah.
This is not who I would pick. This
Sure.
is what I think they'll do, right? And so I'm of the belief that this year no running back should go in the first round. I think there's plenty of value in the second round. that you can get the guy you want to get. I've heard that they love Najee Harris, and so the thought is probably he won't be there by our second round pick. To which I would just say, okay, trade up earlier into the second round and get your guy. I've heard that they're looking at him with this pick. Again, not what I would do because, John, I do agree. You have good linemen still on the board. Build your line. And then there are 4 or 5 good running backs that will go day 2. So if you don't get Harris, just get one of the other guys. There's 4 or 5 good guys that could come in and start. That's what I would do, but it's not what I think they'll do.
Unless they just want that 5th-year option and plan to run him into the ground and then move on.
Yeah, they could. I mean, and they could very well think that. I mean, they could, we saw it with Le'Veon Bell. We saw it with James Conner that they'll say, Le'Veon Bell, hey, I want more money. Oh, no, we're good. We're going to move on. We have James Conner. They run James Conner into the ground. Oh, no, we're good. We'll draft a running back. So they might do that. Hey, we'll have this guy for 5 years and then we'll push him out the door. We'll draft somebody else.
Yeah. I see Ben Roethlisberger returning, though. And I think, okay, they just lost Alejandro Villanueva. And they're going to want to keep Ben Roethlisberger healthy if they have a shot this year for a Super Bowl. Because I think this is probably his last run. I could also see, though, a guy like Najee Harris, because he can also take the pressure off. Not in the same way that an offensive lineman would, but if you have a guy in the backfield like Harris who can catch and run, the ability he has, that helps as well. Something, whether it's tackle or running back here, something to help out Ben Roethlisberger and try to get them over the hump to get another Super Bowl run.
It's, since you brought up Ben, they're a team that I think, we talked about Mills, Pitts, and Kellen Mond, that I could see them taking one of those guys. I mean, I don't know how much they believe in Dwayne Haskins, being their future. Who knows? Maybe they do. But I think they're one of those teams that they're saying, okay, this is probably Ben's last year. Maybe he has one more after that, but this is probably Ben's last year. We should get one of those guys on day 2 and see if he can be our long-term solution.
All right. Zipping right in, we're going towards the home stretch. Jacksonville, who is number 1, is on the clock, is now number 25. You guys both went with Trevon Moehrig. This is also a range I could see him going. 25 range. I went with Kadarius Toney, the wide receiver. Florida stays in Florida. Give your QB a weapon. So I think this is an option here. I wouldn't be surprised with anything Jacksonville could do here.
The Jags have so many picks in this draft. They can really do whatever they want. I just think it's best player available. I'm not sure receiver here, but maybe it all depends. I mean, they still have Shenault, who they got last year, who I think kind of is a really good playmaker, but you have a new regime coming in. They could want something different. I just think Moehrig, this is about his range, and the Panthers could use a guy like him.
Yeah, I did the same. Best player available. Yeah.
No, here, and I've just heard Tony Rubert to them. So if he falls into the second round, that might be a target spot for there as well. So I just was matching players with teams more than anything when you get down here. We keep going down. Number 26 overall. I've mentioned this before. They need some space for it. Who's a defensive front that could maybe afford to have a player that can't play all 3 downs? Barmore could go here. This is the only first-round spot to me that makes sense. Is it Cleveland? Otherwise, I see him falling out of the first round. Chris, I see you went with him as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they signed Jadeveon Clowney, so I don't think they're drafting an edge here. You have Denzel Ward in their secondary and all of that. You have Landry and Odell Beckham coming back, so I don't think they go receiver. And so I think this is a spot that you could take Barrymore and just kind of see what you have. I agree, John. If he doesn't go here, I think he falls out of the first. But I think they can afford to take him here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have JOK here. I'm not sure if he falls this far or not, but I think he'd be a really good fit in Cleveland. And like a tweener linebacker, I'm just not sure some of these other teams above them are looking for a guy quite like that. I think it'd be a really good pick for Cleveland if he falls this far. I just couldn't find a fit for him, and so that was about it here. It feels like this late in the draft, it's like, okay, how are we going to match up some of these guys, or what fits are we going for? Like my next one with the Ravens, I mean, they have 2 picks now at the end of the draft. What are they going to do? I just felt like the Penn State edge rusher here is probably a good fit. But there's a few other guys that they could easily take.
Yeah. I went Nick Bolton. I told you he's one of my favorite linebackers. As far as like true linebacker, of course, love JOK. Here, right there. And if he went at 26 overall, Ravens fans would just be throwing pens, I think, at that point, because he got him right there. A player who's just going to be smart, going to play hard, can diagnose and fit in the system. And Baltimore just has that propensity of, we're not going to get too creative with it. We're just going to pick our best player available. But I think that within reason comes in here, and that's why I went with linebacker Nick Bolton out of Missouri.
I went with Tevin Jenkins. You replaced the tackle you lost in that trade, and then that kind of frees you up at 31 to get an additional weapon. So that's why I went with Jenkins at 27. And Foose, I see that we both went with Jenkins. You went with him at 31. I went at 27.
Yeah. When I looked at him, he played right tackle, I believe, at Oklahoma State. And I think one of the things that Baltimore is going to be asking these tackles, whichever one they draft, because I think they will draft one, is, are you fine not playing left tackle?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, they have Stanley, and they don't need a guy that can play left tackle. They need a guy that's comfortable being that guy at right tackle. And I think Jenkins is a good fit. Whether it's 27, 31, I don't think it makes too big of a difference.
And on that note, me and you, Chris, both went with Terrence Marshall Jr. with them at 31 as well. We'll come back down to that here in a little bit. 28, I had that trade with Colts on the clock. I feel like they need an edge rusher. All right, put Kwity Paye up earlier. Jason Noah just seemed like a natural fit there for need and where we were at in the draft. No, there weren't any other real blinking lights for Indianapolis for where I was. You could argue the wide receiver, but again, I wanted Elijah Moore to go to Green Bay. Because that's how I wanted to play out. There's a little bit of manipulation. Probably not where it's going to happen, but I like to create some storylines. But you guys had 28 with the Saints, where they didn't trade in you guys' world.
Yeah, Zaven Collins is a guy I talked about. He's one of my sleepers. I think 28 here is excellent value for him. I don't know what it is. He just feels like a good fit in New Orleans. That's about all I can explain. Chris, did you get some insight or some rumor or something I missed?
I didn't. I mean, I think just looking at some of the scouting stuff and all of that, the physical ability, I think is it's off the charts. And Foose, you use the word value. That's what I saw here at 28 of this is a guy that could potentially go higher. And, I think even being at Tulsa probably scares some teams off, which is why he's probably lower on the board. But he's one of these guys that I think at 28, you almost have to take him. You don't want him to fall. You kind of have to take him. And I think he can play right away. So I that's why I had New Orleans taking him there.
Yeah, if Zaven Collins was at a school like Alabama, LSU, something like that, and played linebacker, he'd be going a lot higher.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, it seems like we definitely have a consensus that Green Bay tries to right their wrongs from last year.
Yes.
Get Aaron Rodgers a weapon.
Yeah, they even made a statement, was it yesterday or today, that Rodgers is their quarterback for this foreseeable future, which is really just like what changed between this year and last year. Like, you had Aaron Rodgers, you know who he is. Like, this shouldn't be a shock to you.
Rodgers is chip on the shoulder guy. So since his draft, so piss him off, go get an MVP. Tell him you can't. He's gonna tell you what's up.
Yeah.
So I mean that team has. They're going to look back on the career they had with Aaron Rodgers, and they're just going to be kicking themselves that they didn't do more to support him over his time. Talk about a talent that probably will never see the levels of success that he probably should have gotten had he had some support there.
Yeah, I agree.
We talked about Baltimore back again. We talked about those picks, Terrace Marshall. I promise I can read with my glasses. So we got Tevin Jenkins. And then the Super Bowl champs rounding out the end of round one.
Are you just going to ignore the Eagles trade there?
Yeah, I saw that they traded back up. Yeah.
Oh, interrupt. Got to speak up. Yeah, so Philly trades back up at number 30 overall, gets back into the first round. We've got some drama.
Yeah, I just, after Howie last year let Justin Jefferson slip past him, I think he's going to go out and get his guy that he wants at receiver. We have 11 picks this year, and so we have lots of ammo. We also have a guy of the name of Zach Ertz still available. Buffalo is one of those teams where this pick is just a luxury pick for them. They have an amazing roster.
Yeah.
I've seen Travis Etienne mocked here. That could happen. That's just like such a luxury pick. It's crazy because they invested 2 mid-round picks in running backs, and they're 2 decent ones, just not home run hitters. But I think that getting the guy like Zach Ertz for the Bills could really help out because he's already an established guy.
Mm-hmm.
12 personnel would be great for them. And the Eagles are able to move up. Apparently they love Terrace Marshall. That's just a rumor I've heard for a while. I'm not the biggest fan of his, but he's a big guy in the slot that took over for Jefferson and did a really good job. And so I could easily see Philly trying to move up, especially in front of Baltimore, try to grab their guy.
That's an interesting point there, Fuse, about Ertz going over there. Imagine Buffalo having the middle of the field attack being Ertz and Beasley.
Diggs going over the top.
Yeah, that's a nice combo there. So I forgot number 30 existed whatsoever, apparently. I just went blind to it. I had the Bills taking an edge rusher, just add more talent to the defense. It was really just, hey, let's throw something just to add to the swarm that has been their defense for the past couple of years. I think you said it. There's not a better or good pick right here with Buffalo. Yep. They're already a stacked team.
It's what's going to get them over the Chiefs.
Yeah. And then, Chris, you had Jalen Phillips there, another edge rusher. Get pressure on the QB.
Yeah. In my mind, he's the best edge rusher available, so that's who Buffalo takes.
Right. Now, I almost considered him here as well. It was back and forth, and I've just heard good things about his ease there. Phillips, I've heard some question marks off the field, but also believe, hey, if any team probably doesn't care as much. Like, Buffalo doesn't seem like the type of team that they give me that vibe. They're just going to take some good players. But I don't know. Maybe a Florida kid doesn't want to go to Buffalo. Maybe he botches the interviews on purpose. So
this pick isn't going to make or break their franchise. So.
Absolutely. Speaking of a pick that's not going to make or break a franchise, we already touched on 31 multiple times because I don't know how to follow sequence of numbers. 32, Tampa Bay Bucks. I saw a article to where this is the first time in like decades to where a returning Super Bowl champion retained their players, that they didn't have people leaving to go sign contracts with other teams.
Yeah.
Which is why we probably haven't seen back-to-back Super Bowl champions in a while.
Yeah.
Which it's the LeBron James effect, ring chasing. Let's stick around. You're having that NBA effect where players are willing to take maybe a little bit less to stick around an area where they think they're going to have success, which is smart. You get on a Super Bowl team, it's kind of like being on the Dallas Cowboys where you're going to have opportunities for a while beyond football.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
this is, I talked about Buffalo having luxury pick. This is like the ultimate luxury pick here with Tampa. It seems like we just went in the trenches for them.
Yeah.
I went with Barrymore because I see him still available here because I don't think he's a first round talent. I don't think there is a real first round talent when it comes to D tackles
Yeah.
in this draft. But they was it Veta V had some time he was missing last year, quite a bit, and then Ndamukong Suh is also getting older. So I think they're just like, you know what, let's just get a guy that can be rotational, give them a break every now and then in snaps, and if he needs to play a game or two, he can come in and do that.
Yeah. I
More
went
of a need pick.
Yeah, I went Leatherwood, tackle out of Alabama. You're not going to be upset you have offensive line depth
Yeah.
ever. So, especially as Tom gets older, he's not a mobile QB. The more you can add depth there to make sure that he never has a run for your life scenario, you want to ensure that. But I mean, I could just as easily see somebody trading up for the last pick in the first round to get that fifth-year option on somebody.
Yeah, Foose, you've said the phrase luxury pick, and that's what I see here, that they can take a chance on Gregory Rousseau of, okay, there's no real holes, no real weaknesses, so why not roll the dice on a guy who a couple years ago, 19 sacks in a season. It's funny, reading an article about him, GMs are all over the place with him. Some see him kind of creeping into the end of the first. Some are saying, man, maybe he'll fall into the third. Like, we just don't know. And a lot have said, okay, we know the issues, but we can't unsee what we saw a couple seasons ago. I just think Tampa Bay, too, kind of a high accountability system right now. And so that's where a guy like that can maybe thrive. So it's definitely a boomer bust pick, but I think they can afford to make it in the position that they're in. So I could definitely see them going Rousseau at 32.
Yeah, they're a big question mark. I think one position they will not take is running back.
Yeah,
they're pretty set there. Receiver, quarterback, tight end, but trenches, I think is. But I think what John said too, just looking for that team to jump up and take a guy for a fifth-year option, or a guy that they think is going to go at the beginning of the second round. Baltimore did that not too long ago with Lamar Jackson. Kyle Trask, Kellen Mond, Davis Mills. If there's a team that loves them,
yeah,
and they hear another team that loves them, that this is a place for them. But yeah, who knows?
And if you had anybody fall, because if you have anybody that's falling down the draft board, you have somebody that's maybe projected as a top second round, second round talent, or like a mid first round talent, but I don't know if they're going to be able to get him at the third pick in the second round, or somebody else wants to jump up ahead of time. There's two picks that are usually the most value in trades for draft. It's the end of the first round and the beginning of the second. Those beginning of the next days where everybody gets a chance to reset their draft board. Then you have people get a plan of attack. Is it something worth trading up for? I think back to Dallas trading up for DeMarcus Lawrence. This is the last efficient edge rusher we see in this draft before it just turns into a bunch of guys. So is there somebody on the board at the end of these rounds that potentially we could reach out to? But one thing's for sure is everything we talked about today. Tomorrow there's going to be new news that comes out. It's going to throw a wrench in all of this. But it's fun to see, and I think what we're going to do after the draft, after everything gets said and done, and we get a chance to review everything, we'll come back and compare, see how we did, contrast. We'll talk about some undrafted free agents. We'll go in, maybe get some grades, do some projections on who we think is going to be in the playoffs, who's going to win each division. Just ridiculous circumstance, wide, circumstantial, unbiased, but super biased predictions for what we expect to happen over the next year. But otherwise, we're coming up on 2 hours. It's a lot of content we put out for you guys. We appreciate you sticking around. If you like hearing what we have to say, you want to follow along, we are Friends and Foes. It is a football show. You can find us where podcasts you have on your devices. Right now, Apple and iTunes is being a little tricky with us, so we're trying to work some tech issues out with them. Also, we're going to find links to the YouTube channel and post this up as well. But for Chris Cortez, Michael Foose, I'm John Damon. Thanks for sticking around, guys. Y'all have a good one.